I chose not to invite my golden child brother to my wedding, which enraged my parents to the point where they threatened to cut me off financially. They even tried to sabotage the event, but it all backfired spectacularly, leaving them stunned like never before. I never thought planning my wedding would be this complicated, but then again, I never thought I'd have to make the decision to not invite my brother, Mike. Growing up, Mike was always the golden child. While I struggled for even a hint of approval from our parents, Mike was showered with praise, attention, and opportunities one could only dream of. It wasn't just about the better birthday parties or more expensive gifts. He got unconditional support, while I was often left to fend for myself. The resentment had built slowly, year after year, as I watched my achievements go unnoticed while Mike's every minor success was celebrated like a miracle. When it came to big moments in my life, graduating college, landing my first job, getting engaged, my parents were lukewarm at best. In contrast, when Mike got a promotion or announced he was buying a new car, they treated it like he'd won the Nobel Prize. The realization that my family would never see me the way they saw Mike was painful, but it wasn't surprising. I'd grown used to being the afterthought, the one who was expected to be okay, no matter what. And, to be fair, I had managed to build a pretty good life for myself without their constant validation. But the idea of my wedding day, a day that was supposed to be about me and Jake, being overshadowed by my brother's presence? That was too much to bear. The decision not to invite Mike wasn't impulsive. It came after countless sleepless nights and tearful conversations with Jake. He knew about the years of favoritism, the way my parents always made excuses for Mike's behavior, and how they'd consistently overlooked my achievements in favor of his. "You don't have to justify this to me," Jake assured me one night as we lay in bed, my head resting on his chest. "This is about creating a day that's truly about us." Still, I couldn't shake the anxiety about telling my parents. I could almost predict their response: denial, outrage, and possibly even emotional manipulation. But I was determined to do what was best for my well-being, even if it meant facing their wrath. The dreaded conversation happened one Sunday afternoon. I'd invited my parents over, hoping that maybe a face-to-face discussion would soften the blow. We sat in the living room, the air thick with anticipation, as I tried to muster the courage to say the words I knew would hurt them. "I've decided not to invite Mike to the wedding," I finally blurted out, my voice shaky but resolute. The room went silent. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief, and my father's face hardened instantly. "You're not inviting your brother," my mother repeated, as if she couldn't process the words. "What kind of message does that send?" "It sends the message that I'm prioritizing my happiness," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is my wedding, and I want it to be about me and Jake, not about managing family drama." My father leaned forward, his voice low and filled with an anger I hadn't heard in years. "This is petty, Sarah. Whatever issues you have with Mike, you need to put them aside. He's your brother." "Yes, he is," I said, fighting back tears. "But he's also hurt me deeply, and I'm tired of pretending that everything's fine when it's not." My mother, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. "If you go through with this," she said slowly, as if weighing each word, "you can forget about any support from us, financial or otherwise." It wasn't the first time they'd used money as leverage, but it still stung. I looked them in the eyes, my voice calm but unwavering. "I never asked for your money. I just wanted your understanding." The conversation ended abruptly, with my parents storming out of the house. I sat on the couch, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. It hurt to stand up to them, but it also felt like a small victory, one that had been a long time coming. The next few days were filled with emotional whiplash. My mother sent a barrage of texts, ranging from guilt-tripping, "How could you do this to your own family?" to outright manipulative, "You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." I tried to maintain my composure, responding only with short, polite messages that reaffirmed my decision. But it was exhausting. Then there was Mike. He called me one evening, and I hesitated before answering. I knew it wouldn't be pleasant, but I felt I owed him a conversation. "So, you're really not inviting me?" he started, his tone somewhere between disbelief and anger. "No, Mike, I'm not," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is my wedding, and I need to protect my peace." He scoffed. "Your peace? What about the family? What about the fact that I'm your brother's?" "You're my brother," I replied, my voice breaking slightly. "But you've never acted like it. You've always been the favorite, and I've always been left behind. I'm not doing that on my wedding day." Mike's voice turned cold. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous. And now you're being selfish." The words hit hard, but I refused to let them sway me. If that's how you see it, then maybe this is exactly why you shouldn't be there. He hung up without another word, and I felt a strange sense of finality. I knew the decision would hurt, but I hadn't realized how freeing it would be to finally speak my truth. As the wedding day approached, I found myself oscillating between excitement and dread. I was thrilled to be marrying Jake, the man who had shown me what real love and support looked like. But I was also bracing for whatever my parents and Mike might try next. Jake was my constant anchor through it all. One evening, as I sat on the couch, scrolling through wedding details on my laptop, he came over and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You're strong," he whispered. "And no matter what happens, this day will be perfect, because we'll be together." It was exactly what I needed to hear. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. I had chosen myself, and now it was time to move forward, one step closer to the day that would truly be about us. When I broke the news to my parents, it felt like a bomb had gone off. My mother's face twisted in shock, while my father stared blankly, as if waiting for me to say I was joking. The silence was heavy, like the calm before a storm. "You're not inviting Mike," my mother repeated, disbelief turning into fury. Her voice got louder with each word. "Do you know how embarrassing this will be? What will people think of us? Of you?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had prepared for this reaction, but hearing it out loud was still painful. "This isn't about what people will think," I said firmly. "It's about me finally drawing a boundary. I want a wedding where I feel genuinely happy, not one filled with old resentments." My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet up until now, leaned forward, his expression hardening. "We've supported you all these years," he said slowly, as if trying to control his anger. "And this is how you repay us? By excluding your brother from one of the most important days of your life? It's not just petty, it's cruel. Supported me?" I shot back, my voice shaking slightly. "You've ignored me for years. You've given Mike everything while making me feel like an afterthought. This is one decision I'm making for me, and I won't change my mind." My mother looked as if she were about to cry, but I couldn't tell if it was out of sadness, frustration, or a sense of lost control. "You're being selfish," she spat. "This isn't just your day. It's a family event. You're tearing this family apart." "No," I corrected her, my voice strong. "The family was already divided. You just never noticed because it worked in your favor." The room fell into a tense silence. Then my father delivered the final blow. "If you go through with this, Sarah, you can forget about any financial support from us, now or in the future." It was a thinly veiled threat, one I had anticipated. I knew they would try to use money as leverage just like they always had. But this time I was ready. "I never asked you for a dime," I said, meeting his gaze. "And I don't need your money now." They left shortly after, their parting words filled with accusations and veiled guilt trips. "You'll regret this," my mother said as she walked out the door. "Mark my words." I shut the door behind them, leaning against it as a mix of anger, sadness, and relief washed over me. I had stood my ground, but it felt like a hollow victory. My wedding day was supposed to be a joyful milestone, but it was turning into a battlefield. The backlash wasn't limited to my parents. Within hours of the confrontation, Mike called, his voice dripping with condescension. "Really, Sarah?" he sneered. "You're not inviting me to your wedding? You're seriously doing this?" "Yes, I am," I replied calmly, trying to keep my composure. "This is about protecting my peace." Mike laughed bitterly. "Your peace? You're just being a jealous brat. You've always been like this, trying to make everything about you." His words stung, but they weren't surprising. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said, trying to make him understand. "I'm doing this because I need to take care of myself for once." "Whatever," he shot back. "You'll come crawling back when you realize how much you need us." He hung up before I could respond, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Part of me wanted to scream, but another part felt oddly calm. I was finally making a choice that centered on me, and not what others expected. The days that followed were filled with silence from my parents. They didn't call, didn't text, and didn't respond to any messages from Jake, who had tried to play peacemaker by inviting them for coffee. It was as if they were waiting for me to break first. One day, my mother showed up unexpectedly at my office. She barged into the lobby, her face set with determination. "We need to talk," she said coldly. I led her to a private room, not wanting to cause a scene in front of my coworkers. "What is it, Mom?" I asked, already exhausted by the ongoing drama. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. We can't let you make such a foolish decision. You'll regret not having your family there. I felt a surge of anger. I've had my family around for years, and it hasn't exactly been supportive. Why would I want that on my wedding day? She looked genuinely hurt for the first time. Sarah, we love you. We're just trying to protect the family. Then why don't you protect me for once? I asked, tears welling up in my eyes. Why is it always about Mike? Her silence spoke volumes. For once, she had no rebuttal. The backlash wasn't just verbal, it became strategic. A few days later, I got a call from the venue manager. Hi, Sarah, she began hesitantly. I just wanted to check in about some changes your brother requested to the guest list. I felt my blood boil. What changes? He tried to add his name and a few others, she explained. We didn't approve it, of course, but I thought you should know. It was a blatant violation, and it confirmed that Mike was willing to cross any boundary to get his way. I called Jake immediately, explaining what had happened. This is getting out of hand, he said, sounding concerned. I think we need to hire security for the wedding. The thought of needing security at my own wedding was heartbreaking, but I knew he was right. Let's do it, I agreed. I just want to enjoy our day, without having to worry about them. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of last-minute preparations, but the sense of dread lingered. Jake did everything he could to keep my spirits up, planning romantic date nights and surprising me with little gifts to remind me of the happiness we were about to embark on. One night, as we sat on the couch, he looked me in the eyes and said, No matter what happens, Sarah, this is our day. And nothing, absolutely nothing, can take that away from us. His words were a lifeline, a reminder of why I had made the decision in the first place. I was choosing us, choosing me. And as painful as it was to face the backlash, I knew I was doing the right thing. I should have known that my family wouldn't give up easily. In the weeks following my decision to exclude Mike from the wedding, the pressure intensified in ways I hadn't anticipated. The guilt trips came in waves, texts from my mother filled with emotional blackmail, and phone calls from relatives who suddenly felt the need to mediate the situation. One afternoon at work, I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone buzzed incessantly. I glanced at the screen and saw 5 missed calls from my mom. My stomach tightened. It was unusual even for her. I tried to ignore it, but then a colleague leaned over and whispered, Someone is here for you in the lobby, Sarah. She says it's urgent. As soon as I reached the lobby, I saw my mother pacing, her face flushed with anger. We need to talk, she announced loudly, causing heads to turn. I motioned for us to step outside, not wanting to create a scene. Mom, you can't just show up at my job like this, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. You're tearing this family apart, she hissed, her voice dripping with accusation. All because of your selfishness. You're the one causing the drama, Sarah, not us. I took a deep breath, determined not to let her get to me. This isn't about being selfish, Mom. It's about protecting my happiness. Her eyes narrowed. If you don't invite your brother, then I won't come either. Is that what you want? I stared at her, a mix of exhaustion and resolve washing over me. If that's your choice, I accept it. For a moment, she looked genuinely taken aback, as if she'd never expected me to call her bluff. She quickly regained her composure and stormed off, leaving me standing there with a strange sense of relief. The next escalation came from Mike, who seemed intent on asserting his presence, invited or not. One day, I received a call from the venue manager. Hi, Sarah, she began hesitantly. I wanted to let you know that a man claiming to be your brother came by today. He tried to make changes to the guest list, adding several names and altering the seating chart. My blood ran cold. Are you serious? I asked, barely able to contain my anger. Yes, she confirmed, sounding just as bewildered as I felt. I didn't make any changes, of course, but I thought you should know. Mike's actions were more than just overstepping. They were a blatant attempt to undermine my decisions. I called him immediately, my voice shaking with rage. How dare you try to change the guest list behind my back? He didn't even try to deny it. You're being ridiculous, Sarah, he said, his voice filled with irritation. I'm just trying to fix your mistake. It's not your wedding to fix, I shot back. You need to respect my decision, whether you agree with it or not. His response was a sarcastic laugh. You'll regret this, Sarah. Mark my words. I hung up, seething with frustration. It was clear that Mike wasn't just hurt by my decision. He was actively trying to sabotage my wedding. I felt violated, as if my autonomy over one of the most important days of my life had been stolen. That evening, I vented to Jake, who listened patiently, his face set with determination. We need to be prepared, he said finally. If they're willing to go this far, who knows what they might try on the day of the wedding? I hated that it had come to this, but I knew he was right. We needed security, not just for peace of mind, but to ensure the day wasn't ruined by unnecessary drama. It was a painful realization, but one that felt necessary. I called the venue and arranged for additional security, instructing them to strictly enforce the guest list. The decision to hire security at my own wedding was both heartbreaking and empowering. I was drawing a line, one that could not be crossed, no matter how hard my family pushed. The following week, my mother tried another tactic. This time, she sent a string of long, emotional texts late at night, painting herself as the victim. "Do you know how much this is hurting me?" one message read. "I can't believe you'd exclude your own brother over something so petty. I raised you better than this." I read the messages in silence, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. She was trying to manipulate me, and I recognized the pattern all too well. I typed a short response. "I understand that this is hard for you, but my decision is final. Please respect that." Her reply came quickly, filled with more guilt and accusations. But I didn't engage. I knew that no amount of explaining would change her mind. The final straw came a week before the wedding when my father called unexpectedly. I hadn't heard from him since the initial confrontation, so I wasn't sure what to expect. "Sarah," he began, his voice unusually calm. "I think you're making a mistake." "I'm sorry you feel that way, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "But I have to do what's right for me." He sighed heavily. "I never thought it would come to this. You're choosing a wedding over your family." "No," I corrected him, feeling a surge of clarity. "I'm choosing myself, for once." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "Well, if you change your mind, we'll be here." I hung up feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The escalations, the guilt trips, and the constant manipulation had all been exhausting, but I had stayed true to my decision. I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. As the wedding day drew closer, I felt a sense of calm begin to settle in. The storm of family drama was still raging, but I was standing firm, grounded in the choice I had made for my own happiness. And that was worth everything. As the wedding day approached, the pressure from my family only grew stronger. While Jake and I were supposed to be finalizing last-minute details, like flowers and the music playlist, most of our conversations were about handling potential disruptions from my parents or Mike. Jake, always practical, brought up the idea of security again. We were sitting in the living room, surrounded by wedding decorations, when he gently broached the subject. "Sarah," he said, his tone serious but calm, "I think we need to hire security for the wedding." I looked up from the seating chart I was working on. "Security? You really think that's necessary?" "Yes, I do," he said, nodding slowly. "Your mom showed up at your work unannounced. Mike tried to alter the guest list, and who knows what they might try next. I want you to feel safe on our day." The thought of needing security at my own wedding stung, a bitter reminder of how far things had escalated. But deep down, I knew Jake was right. "Okay," I agreed reluctantly. "Let's do it. I don't want to risk them ruining the day we've worked so hard to create." We arranged for a security team to be present at the venue, with strict instructions to enforce the guest list and ensure no unexpected visitors. It was both heartbreaking and empowering, a sign of the rift that had formed between me and my family, but also a symbol of my resolve to protect my peace, no matter what. The day before the wedding, I was at the venue for a final walkthrough when my phone buzzed with yet another call from my mother. I hesitated before answering, knowing it was likely to be another attempt to guilt-trip me into changing my mind. "Sarah," she started, her voice low and weary. "Are you really going to do this? Are you really going to exclude your own brother from your weddings?" "Yes, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I've made my decision." She let out a dramatic sigh, her disappointment palpable even over the phone. "You'll regret this, you know," she warned, her tone shifting from desperate to almost threatening. I paused for a moment, feeling a familiar pang of sadness. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "I'll regret it if I don't stand up for myself." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You're being foolish," she finally said. "This wedding should be about family, about unity. But you're making it about division." "I'm making it about me," I corrected her, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. For once in my life, I'm making a decision based on what I want, not what others expect of me. She hung up abruptly, and I was left with a lingering sense of both relief and loss. I knew that taking this stand would cost me something, but I hadn't anticipated just how deeply it would cut. The morning of the wedding arrived, and I was filled with a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. I stood in front of the mirror, my wedding dress fitting perfectly, but my mind was clouded with thoughts of what could go wrong. Jake sensed my tension as we prepared to leave for the venue. "Are you okay?" he asked, taking my hands in his. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm just nervous." He squeezed my hands gently. "Whatever happens today, remember that this is our day. Nothing else matters." His words brought a wave of calm over me. I took a deep breath, and slowly, excitement began to replace the anxiety. I was about to marry the love of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that joy away from me. At the venue, everything seemed to be going smoothly, at least at first. The flowers were in place, the tables were set, and guests were beginning to arrive. I stood with my bridesmaids, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation, when one of the security guards approached me. "Excuse me, Miss Sarah," he said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Your parents and brother are outside. They're demanding to be let in." I felt a lump form in my throat. I had expected this, but the reality of it still hit hard. "What are they saying?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're insisting that they have a right to be here, that it's a family matter," the guard explained. "Do you want us to let them in?" I shook my head firmly. "No. Please ask them to leave." The guard nodded and headed back toward the entrance. I took a deep breath, feeling both empowered and heartbroken. This was the moment I had dreaded but also prepared for. I wasn't backing down. Minutes later, the wedding coordinator approached me with an urgent look. "Your family isn't leaving," she whispered. "They're causing a bit of a scene at the gate." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. "Get Jake," I told one of the bridesmaids. I needed his presence, his reassurance. When Jake arrived, I could see the worry in his eyes. "What's happening?" he asked. "They're still out there," I said quietly, feeling the tears start to well up. He pulled me into a tight hug. "It's going to be okay," he murmured into my ear. "You've got this. We've got this." The security team eventually managed to escort my family off the premises without further drama. As I watched them leave from a distance, I felt a strange sense of finality. This was it, the culmination of years of unresolved tension, finally brought to a head. Despite the rough start, the ceremony itself was beautiful. As I walked down the aisle toward Jake, everything else seemed to fade away. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly present, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. The vows we exchanged were filled with love, commitment, and an unspoken promise to protect each other from whatever came our way. The reception was filled with laughter, heartfelt speeches, and moments of pure joy. As we danced under the twinkling lights, I felt lighter than I had in years. This was the wedding I had always dreamed of, one filled with love, not obligation. At one point, Jake pulled me close and whispered, "We did it." I smiled, tears of happiness filling my eyes. Yes, we did. I realized then that, despite everything, I had finally chosen myself. And that choice had brought me the happiest day of my life. The morning of my wedding began with an intense mixture of excitement and dread. I stood in front of the mirror in my bridal suite, my dress fitting perfectly, the veil framing my face. I should have felt like a princess, but anxiety gnawed at me. My thoughts were clouded with a single concern. Would my family try to disrupt the day? I focused on the reason for this day, marrying Jake. As I adjusted my veil one last time, my maid of honor, Lisa, came over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You look stunning, Sarah," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "Today is about you and Jake. Don't let anyone take that away." I smiled, feeling a flicker of confidence. "You're right," I replied. "Today is ours." As the guests began to arrive, I could hear the soft hum of excitement outside. Jake was waiting near the altar, and I felt a surge of love for him. He had been my rock through all the drama, reminding me that our love was worth every challenge. But then, just as the ceremony was about to start, one of the security guards approached the bridal suite, his expression serious but calm. "Miss Sarah," he said quietly, "your parents and brother are outside, demanding to be let in." My heart sank, but I quickly regained my composure. "What are they saying?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "They're insisting they have a right to be here because it's a family event," he explained. "We've told them that they're not on the guest list, but they're not backing down." I felt a wave of mixed emotions, anger, sadness, and disappointment. But before I could respond, Jake suddenly appeared in the doorway. He had overheard the conversation, and he was already by my side, his hand reaching for mine. "You focus on the ceremony," he said, his eyes filled with reassurance. "I'll handle this with the security team. Nothing is going to ruin our day." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He smiled warmly. "You'll never have to find out." Jake left with the guard, and I turned my attention back to the ceremony. I was determined to block out the chaos happening outside and focus on what truly mattered, marrying the man I loved. Meanwhile, outside the venue, the security team was trying to de-escalate the situation. My parents were visibly upset, with Mike shouting something about family betrayal. I later learned that my mother had even tried to guilt-trip the security staff, using the classic line, "A mother has a right to see her daughter get married," but the security team was well prepared. "We understand, ma'am," one of them said politely. "But this is a private event, and we're under strict instructions. Please respect the couple's wishes." With that, they were escorted off the property. Jake returned just in time, his expression calm as ever. He leaned in and whispered, "It's all taken care of. You're free to enjoy your day, love." And I did. As the music began and the doors opened, I stepped onto the aisle with Lisa by my side. All the tension faded as I locked eyes with Jake, who was waiting for me with the biggest smile. I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. I was walking toward my future, and it was brighter than I had ever imagined. The ceremony was filled with love and warmth. As we exchanged vows, I felt every word resonate deeply. Jake's promises were simple but sincere: to love me unconditionally, to stand by me no matter what, and to create a life built on mutual respect. When it was my turn, I looked into his eyes, tears finally falling as I pledged my love and commitment. "I choose you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Today, tomorrow, and always." When the officiant declared us husband and wife, the cheers from our friends and Jake's family were deafening. There were no fake smiles, no forced pleasantries, just pure, unfiltered joy. The reception was just as magical. Laughter echoed throughout the room as heartfelt speeches were made. Jake's father spoke warmly about welcoming me into their family, while Lisa delivered a touching speech about our friendship and the strength I'd shown in standing up for myself. Jake and I shared our first dance as husband and wife under twinkling fairy lights. He held me close, whispering, "This is just the beginning, Sarah." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "I know," I replied, "and I'm ready for it." We laughed, danced, and celebrated with the people who truly mattered. It wasn't a wedding filled with elaborate toasts from estranged family members or awkward reunions. Instead, it was intimate, genuine, and filled with love from those who accepted us unconditionally. Later that night, as we prepared to leave, Jake pulled me aside one more time. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You faced a lot to get here, and you never wavered." "Neither did you," I replied. "I couldn't have done this without you." We shared a quiet moment, soaking in the victory of not just the day, but of standing up for the life we wanted to build together. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. Despite the challenges and heartbreak, I had chosen my happiness, and I wasn't alone. I had Jake, real friends, and a future that was entirely my own. And as we drove away from the venue, I looked back one last time, not with regret, but with a sense of closure. I had taken back my day, my choices, and my life. And that was a victory no one could take away. The days after the wedding were a mix of relief, sadness, and a strange sense of calm. I had braced myself for calls or messages from my family, but none came. It was as if my decision to exclude Mike had sealed an invisible barrier between us, a barrier that had probably been there all along but had never been this clear. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the silence or the realization that this might be the end of my relationship with them. But I also knew that I had finally drawn a line, and that line was a necessary step toward my happiness. The day after the wedding, Jake and I left for our honeymoon, a quiet, secluded beach far from the chaos of recent events. As soon as we arrived, I felt the weight of the last few months begin to lift. The sound of the waves was soothing, as if the ocean was telling me to let it all go. The first few days were spent unwinding. We strolled along the shore, let the sun warm our skin, and savored every moment without worrying about what lay behind us. Jake, as always, was my constant source of support. He kept reminding me that what we had built together was worth every difficult decision I'd made. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jake turned to me. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah," he said, his voice gentle but filled with emotion. "You chose yourself, and that's the bravest thing you could have done." His words resonated deeply. I looked into his eyes, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I think I finally know what real love feels like," I said softly, my voice steady. He pulled me close, and we watched the sun disappear into the ocean. It wasn't just romantic love I had found. I had discovered self-love, a kind of acceptance I had never truly felt before. It had taken years of longing for validation from others, but I had finally given it to myself. The honeymoon was exactly what we needed, a chance to reset, to laugh, to dream about our future without any shadows hanging over us. We talked about everything, our hopes, our fears, and even the children we hope to have someday. It was refreshing to think about our lives with a clean slate, unburdened by past hurts. When we returned home, I felt both lighter and more resolved. The house was filled with wedding gifts and cards from friends and Jake's family, who had embraced me fully. I opened each card carefully, grateful for the genuine support that had surrounded us. But as I placed the cards on the mantel, I couldn't help but notice the absence of any message from my parents. I had no illusions about the situation. Their silence was likely permanent, and as painful as that was, it wasn't unexpected. A week after we returned, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was short, "I hope you're happy, Mom." There was no warmth, no attempt at reconciliation. Just a cold, resentful jab, meant to make me question my choices. I stared at the screen, feeling a twinge of sadness, but also a surprising sense of closure. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I had tried to explain myself countless times over the years, but this wasn't about words anymore. It was about actions, and my actions had finally matched the boundaries I had set. Over the following weeks, I settled back into my life with Jake. We started talking about more tangible plans, buying a house, expanding our family, and maybe even getting a dog. Life felt full of possibilities again, without the constant weight of family drama hanging over us. There were still moments when I felt a pang of loss, when I saw a mother and daughter laughing together at a cafe, or when a friend shared a story about her close relationship with her siblings. I wondered if things could have been different, but I knew that I had made the right choice for me. One evening, as Jake and I were watching TV, I turned to him. "Do you think I'll ever hear from them again?" I asked quietly. He paused, considering his words carefully. "Maybe," he said finally, "but whether you do or don't, it won't change what you've accomplished. You've built a life you can be proud of." He was right. I had built a life defined by love, respect, and boundaries. And while my relationship with my family remained uncertain, my sense of self had never been clearer. Months later, as Jake and I looked through photos from the wedding, I realized just how much I had changed. I wasn't a person who would bend over backward for approval anymore. I was someone who had learned to stand up for what I deserved, even when it was painful. I found a photo of Jake and me laughing on the dance floor, our smiles wide and genuine. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling I had rarely experienced growing up. It was a feeling of being exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by the people who truly cared. For the first time, I felt free. Free from the expectations, free from the constant need for validation, and free to create the life I had always dreamed of, with Jake by my side. This was my new beginning. I had chosen my well-being, my happiness, and my future. And no matter what happened next, I knew one thing for certain: I would never settle for less than what I deserved.